The Trouble in Paradise podcast is intended for mature audiences. This means you will hear realistic adult language such as and go off. Audience discretion is advised.
What is knob polishing?
You're gonna make me say this. I am a neglected man.
I like to think that I look like a jack, even though my name's really Bob.
Does he have danglers or something?
Well, it's time to go do them lighthouse duties.
Sitting in the cheese at the old Walmart to cool off.
That should be the headline. Man tasered in the nuts after stealing beef.
Yeah, but you're not gonna sit in the cheese. You're not gonna sit in the cheese, and you're not gonna put ribeyes down your pants either.
House cleaning is secondary. So what is the Viagra triangle?
Possibly we aid in your digestion.
I don't know if his little hand is smaller than his little ears or what.
Aw, well maybe he has a syndrome.
Want to go check out my RV? It's parked right around the corner.
Because I'm pretty sure that I saw some moose knuckle.
No.
There is absolutely some moose knuckle going on.
My swampy friend. What the hell is a swampy friend?
So they're not going to get any scraping on their shaft.
Yes, I'm gonna do a downward dog.
Okay, pretty lady. You had on those gosh darn sexy leather looking shorts.
Ladies and gentlemen, and assholes, gather around. It's time for another action-packed episode of
Trouble in Paradise.
Hi, I'm Nigel Kent,
And I'm Jazmine Starr.
and welcome to Trouble in Paradise.
Our show is a free-thinking, open-minded podcast discussing conspiracy theories, the paranormal, true crimes against humanity, plus our favorite only in Florida stories.
And we are coming at you live from only in Florida. Naples, Florida,
Yeah.
that is. South Naples, Florida. A beautiful place, which has been pretty unseasonably nice the last few days. We haven't had a tremendous amount of rain. It is the rainy season, of course, hurricane season right now. And you can't get in trouble for talking about the weather. So that's why we're leading off with that.
Yeah, how's the weather where you are?
Yeah, and everybody jump on the live chat. We are right here, live streaming on YouTube. But there's other ways to hear us, and those other ways are increasingly important as we find ourselves inundated with the cancers
Yes.
who have been cancering us.
Yes, so a little bit about that. I will say the content presented by Trouble in Paradise contains speculation and conjecture and is not intended as educational material or advice. It is therefore not misinformation and does adhere to YouTube's community guidelines.
Yes, it does. And we are quite, I guess, familiar with those guidelines by now because we've been hit over the head with them a couple of times.
Yes.
But before we get into that and some news regarding our, I guess, response to that and our plans going forward, why don't you let everybody know how to get a hold of us and you and me?
So if you've already found us here on YouTube at Trouble in Paradise, smash and like that subscribe button and join in on the live chat. On Instagram, you can find us at Trouble239. Twitter, it's at Tipcast239.
A Tipcast.
Tipcast239. Email trouble@trouble239.com. Patreon, Trouble239. Audio versions are available on all podcatchers. Please go on Apple and give us that 5-star rating. Our personal accounts, you can find me on Twitter at Jazmine Starr. That's with a Z, JAZMINESTARR 239.
And I'm at Nigel Kent 239 on Twitter. And of course, the podcast is at Tipcast 239 and Trouble 239 on Instagram. Tonight, we are going to talk about something, I guess, it's been an open controversy for a long time, and that is the third tower that fell on September 11th, 2001, the tower known as the Solomon Brothers Building or World Trade Center 7, or just Tower 7 in the popular vernacular. We are going to highlight some of the aspects of that tower's demise that have always been I guess, a little bit controversial, and really I consider most of these nitpicks to be still up in the air. And I also consider World Trade Center 7's collapse to be an unsolved mystery, although I think the methods involved are pretty well documented and well understood by now. Here we are 20 years later, almost.
Yeah.
We are recording this on September 5th, 2021. So we're just a few days away, 6 days away from the 20th anniversary of September 11th, 2001. And we're actually going to be dropping a all-at-once release of a audio-only podcast that contains all of our September 11th material, which we're going to release in a separate feed on or after September 11th, after the 20th anniversary. It's a subject that we keep returning to, and it really was the subject where I got red-pilled 7 or 8 years ago. I was, watching a video by architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, and got my eyes opened and my mind blown. And once you start peeling that onion, man, it's really hard to get to the center of it, How many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop?
Well, this is one big Tootsie Pop to
Yes, it is.
try to lick your way through.
Yep. And I don't think there's a delicious Tootsie Roll at the center of it either.
No, I think there's a bunch of scandalous controversy.
So, Jazmine Star, we also have another kind of housekeeping announcement to make, and that is that we, meaning I, have launched a side podcast called Big Tech Watchdog, which is all about chronicling free speech violations by big technology companies, social media companies, and documenting the kind of collusion that exists between them. I like to call them the social media mafia because they protect their own, like the mafia families of old. And there are example after example of unfair censorship against what I would consider to be constitutionally protected speech. And in the opener for the new podcast, there's a clip of Jack Dorsey saying, yeah, we have every right to censor your political speech if we choose to. Your constitutionally protected speech were his exact words. And so every time Big Tech Watchdog releases, they're going to be roughly 30-minute audio episodes, probably not going to be on YouTube. It would probably get bonked off YouTube in a heartbeat anyway. But the second episode, there's 2 episodes so far, and the second episode covers a real-world harassment attack by eBay against 2 of its users, which included a pig fetus that was sent in the mail, a pig mask that had real hair and blood on it, a box of spiders and spider larvae that they shipped to somebody to scare them, and all kinds of other forms of psychological harassment that were just like straight out of The Godfather. So that's episode 2 of Big Tech Watchdog. So go over to Spotify or Apple or wherever you do your audio podcasts. Subscribe to that one because that's my new project. Of course, Trouble in Paradise will continue unmolested as normal. We're going to keep pumping out the trouble until we can't pump it anymore. We've been looking at some other platforms besides the Tube, since the Tube has apparently developed a great sensitivity problem towards our material. Let's just leave it at that. If Richard Serrett has 2 strikes, we're probably on our way to having 3. And, well.
So you can catch our audio versions on all major podcaster catchers.
And I would recommend that you subscribe because we may not be on YouTube for much longer. We've now had 2 episodes just completely bonked off the platform.
Yes, episode 51. And if you've been here, our last one as well, episode 57.
And they only had one subject in common, which I'm not going to mention again because I don't want this episode getting bonked.
Right.
But there was one common thread between those 2 episodes that Jazmine and I have been like, why in the hell? What set them off about those 2 episodes?
The truth.
Yep. Yeah, the truth. It was just the truth.
Yep.
All right.
You
So,
know,
the truth.
they,
You're
yeah.
segueing, aren't you?
Well, no.
No, okay. All right. Just kidding.
I was going to
I take
say,
it
like, back in Salem, Massachusetts, you know, they, during the witch trials, they were telling the truth, and yet they were put up and burned at the stake.
Yeah, you know, speaking of Richard Serrett, his last podcast episode was about something called psychogenic disease, which is apparently a mass episodic mental illness that has no pathogen. So the pathogen is psychology. And he was talking about the Havana syndrome. And he compares the Havana syndrome, which was this event that happened in Cuba a few years ago at the embassy where people started having these weird physical experiences that they couldn't explain. And they thought that somebody was using some kind of microwave radiation weapon against people at our embassy. But this guy's theory was that there's this thing known as psychogenic illness, which is like one person freaks out, and then another person freaks out, and then another person freaks out. And before you know it, they're all freaking out about essentially nothing. Like there's a zero
Right.
pathogen, no causality situation. But he suggested that the Salem witch trials may have been partially psychogenic in nature, and that people were undergoing mental breakdowns over the paranoia about witchcraft. Even if the people conducting it were, in fact, light workers and with God-given talent.
Well, I mean, some of that is actually, we can see that even today in society.
Well, I mean, the tube is bonking light workers all over the place.
Right.
And, you know, it's a sad state of affairs when...
It's not just the tube, though. I mean, it's other platforms that are making it increasingly more difficult to get your material out there, certain things that you say.
Yeah. And this is the content that makes them able to put bread on their table. Like Jack Dorsey eats because of people like us.
Well, and when it comes to light work, you know, part of their issue that they have is with monetization of that. And you know, hopefully we'll be able to get to that interview at some point that I have somebody set up for. But I don't know. It just depends on how much poison we can take.
Before we hit that, you ever heard about this little trick that the tube does, where if you make a video and you use a commercially available music in the video, commercially published music,
Right.
They take your video down, and so in other words, you can't monetize it. It's visible to yourself, right? And they tell, well, you used, you know, Michael Jackson, you used Thriller, so we're not going to allow you to. And instead of just taking the monetization and sending it over to the artist, what they do is they either shut it down completely or they demonetize you while still paying the person who made the song.
Exactly.
So,
well, you know, I've had that happen as doing Zumba.
Yeah.
We are allowed to present a minute's worth of whatever has come out. That's part of our, I guess, a perk.
As a Zumba instructor.
Yeah. So if we put
it's like a license that you possess to use a minute
if we
worth.
if we have a minute's worth of choreography that we
YouTube
post.
cares about that arrangement, though. They don't care about Zumba.
Well, you have to appeal it every time, you know, anytime Facebook, Instagram, you know, they're constantly removing those and saying that you violated whatever, and then you have to submit an appeal. And about 5 or 6 months later, when the song and the choreography is so old, then we finally get our 1 minute clip back so people can actually see it.
Arm wrestling with the idiots at YouTube who don't understand that there might actually be other licensing arrangements out there than the ones that they wrote for their platform. There was a well, anyway, you were going to hit the segue, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm ready.
You're ready.
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All
I won't look
right.
at your screen. I've been instructed to not look
no,
at your
you
screen.
can't look at my screen.
So we're going to have a little bit of fun before we dive into this, right?
I know. We haven't done this segment for a while, but
What segment is that, Jasmine Star?
I decided that we needed to bring back a little Pick Your Poison.
Pick your poison. You want some background music?
I love background music.
Okay, here it comes. All right.
All right, now that we've got that background music going, Nigel, pick your poison.
Okay.
Would you rather have a highly monetized podcast with a large audience, but know that you are censored, or receive no monetization and have little audience and speak freely?
Okay, so my two choices are be censored. In other words, shut up and
Yeah, you can have
I play by their rules and be really famous, or speak the truth and get punished for it.
Yes.
You know, this is a quandary that I think guys like Tim Pool are really struggling with, because he has 1 million subscribers on YouTube, which is remarkable. And because of those 1 million subscribers, he has a I'm not looking at your screen. Don't worry. He has he's just wicked podcasting studio. He's got, it's like a 14-year-old's wet dream, the setup that he has, because of the money he's made on YouTube. And he really, really pushes the envelope on that show. In fact, he says stuff, those guys say stuff on that show that we would get bonked for if we said it.
We have.
And this is one of the tenets of social media, right? We're going to cover this on Big Tech Watchdog too. Social media companies, they reward the already celebrated at the expense of the people who are nobodies. So if you're just, if you're a really obscure podcast like us,
like Trouble in Paradise.
Yep.
Yeah.
You're going to get a lot less, you're going to get a lot more scrutiny by the censors than if you're Tim Pool, who's pulling, $500,000 a show in advertising hits and stuff like that, or whatever the number is. I mean, it obviously means a lot more to YouTube, and they're going to say, well, he talks about the Fed and he talks about libertarian stuff, but yeah, he's got a lot of viewers and subscribers.
Right.
Yeah. So
And
he's got a little
money.
bit of leverage.
Yeah.
Makes money for
All
him.
right. So pick your poison.
I'd rather tell the truth and be obscure, which is what we're doing.
All right. Pick your poison here. Would you rather know the full truth of 9/11 or the full truth of the space program?
No, brother. Ugh. I mean, I think there's, being that 9/11 happened in my lifetime, and I think has been covered. I think 9/11 has been covered by a much more inquisitive, activist, citizen journalism kind of approach than the space program was in the 80s, 70s, and 60s. Because there was so much propaganda around the Apollo missions and around the space shuttle program that I just don't think people question it as much. And then something like 9/11 happens, and it's like, WTF? What? I mean, people were right to raise an eyebrow, and the propaganda was not as effective at telling the official story, the official narrative about 9/11 as it was about the space program. So I guess it's a really long way of saying,
But
I feel like we know more about 9/11 than we know about the space program.
Right.
And maybe that's because we've studied it more. There's probably some guy out there that's like, man,
Well,
we
we
don't know
haven't.
shit about the space program.
But we haven't even we dove in on SCOBY, and there's even more to that story, and that was in our lifetime. So
and that one
that's
didn't,
why
that one didn't get censored either, did it?
No, but so I'm just wondering, would you rather know the full truth of 9/11 or the space program?
Gosh, that's tough. I'm just going to say I think I'd rather know the full truth about the space program, because it probably lays a platform for a lot of the shit that happened with 9/11.
I think I would concur.
Yeah. Okay.
I really do.
All right. Just wait a minute.
I think so much of the stuff is all tied together in the long run.
Well, that's like the conspiracy theory of everything. right?
I'm just a theorist.
Yes. Hey, this is speculation and conjecture.
Yes. It's theories. And there's nothing wrong with people getting together and talking about having theories or philosophies or...
There's nothing wrong with it. There's everything right about it. It's
Yeah.
speech. It's discourse. It's interaction. It's speculation. It's okay.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with it.
There isn't anything wrong with it.
All right.
So now, would you like to know the full undisclosed information about the deaths of famous celebrities such as Bourdain, MJ, Cobain, Epstein, and McAfee, but live with a handler after gaining the knowledge? Or continue to speculate and fall under a conspiracy theorist title?
Okay, so no, these are all along the same. There's a very consistent theme here going on, Jasmine Star.
Of course.
So I get to know how they all died and the motivation. I get to solve all those murders.
You would have full disclosure of all the information. You would know exactly what happened, every bit of the story.
Okay, but
But you have a handler after that.
what is that? Okay, so what does that mean? What are they going to do?
They're going to be,
I'm not allowed to tell anybody what I know.
No, you essentially have a babysitter attached to you for the rest of your life.
All right.
And making sure that you don't open your mouth.
And so what's the other choice? I can continue to believe that crap?
Or you just continue to speculate and go about your business and be considered
Labeled a conspiracy theorist.
A theorist.
So
yeah.
do I want to proclaim these opinions loudly and be labeled a conspiracy theorist, or know the actual truth, which is probably pretty close to the theories, but never be able to talk about it?
Right, because you have somebody that is with you
Yeah.
to make sure that you don't talk.
Yeah. So what do their methods consist of? Is that are they going to break my legs? Are they going to send shadowy beings to stand at the foot of my bed and all that kind of CIA crap?
Well, I mean, how many of these people potentially have them?
So in other words, if you choose that level of disclosure, you are probably...
Are you signing a deal essentially with
that's
with
a tough
the dark
one.
side?
Yeah. Boy, that's tough because that's attractive knowledge. It's kind of like, it's almost like the story of Adam and Eve, right?
Right.
The tree of knowledge of good and
Right.
evil. And they
Forbidden fruit.
And they ate from that tree. And boy, thanks a lot, guys. And fuck things up for everybody. It was bound to happen sooner or later, though. You know what? God, that's a tough one.
You want that knowledge, don't you?
I do, but you know what? And this is why, conspiracy theories, I think, are generally frowned upon by the greater population, because people mostly want to be happy, unbothered, and trusting of the system that they've been taught to trust.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that.
You grow up, trust the police, trust the firemen, trust your whatever. Judges are good people. Welcome to the chat. Hey, PF3's on the chat. Welcome.
Hey, Frito.
Frito, good to see you.
Oh my gosh, it's wonderful.
So, but you just, but what happens though is would I be the only one allowed to have this knowledge, or could somebody else maybe have it too, and then we get to meet?
No.
That's it.
This
Just
is
me.
cut and dry.
Okay. Well, I'm going to just say, I think since you framed it as a deal with the devil, I'm going to go ahead and stick with the obscure conspiracy theorist. That's going to be my choice on that one.
All right. So no handler for you. No handler for you.
No. Well, just if Frito gets to be my handler, then I'll take the knowledge at that point.
I think it'd be a bit more sinister than that. All right. Pick your poison. Would you rather abolish the FDA or the Fed?
The Fed, boom, because you solve so many problems. This is an easy one. Okay, if you remove the debt machine, the debt creation machine, you take away all the financial motivations and all the. It's like, let me ask you this: between the Fed and the FDA, if there's a snake, do you cut it off at the tail or at the head?
The head.
Yeah, that's why I would. Yeah.
But there's other means of.
This episode is so fucked. Like
we
we're
knew
already
we were.
we haven't even gotten into our subject yet, and we're already just screwed.
I said I put the thing up on Twitter. I said play it safe or nuke it, and the consensus was
nuke it. We're gonna go
nuke it and get strike 3.
All right, so you guys need to get on a. Oh, hey, Frito
Happy
says.
birthday, Mom.
Frito says 76 years, huh?
Yeah.
Ah, a couple years older than my mom.
Well, and I was just thinking, it just seems like yesterday we were eating Fritos from the Wheel of Precious Fritos.
Yeah, the Wheel of Precious
for his
Frito.
birthday.
Like, you're kind of slightly desperate for a gimmick when you're like, what should we do? We got to do something with this trivia wheel. We've had it for like 3 months and we've never used it. Wait a minute. PF3 is having his birthday. Let's do the Precious Frito wheel.
Let me see how many Fritos I can stick in my mouth.
Well, happy birthday, Mom.
Yes.
Happy birthday. You have.
She said the Fed too.
Yeah. Destroy the Fed. Just boom.
All right. Last one here.
All right.
Pick your poison. Would you rather know what was moved from Building 7 on 9/11, or why it was necessary for the building to go down?
All right, so for those not familiar with the theory, there's a theory that a whole bunch of stuff was removed from Building 7 prior to its demolition, right? So the question is, my choices are I get to know what was removed, or what's the other one?
What was moved from Building 7 on 9/11, or why it was necessary for the building to go down.
Okay.
So,
I feel
what
like
were
those
the
are-
contents that were removed, or what was the necessity that they needed to the building to be?
Yeah, that's kind of interesting dichotomy there.
I know. That's why it's poison.
Well, I mean, if you weren't trying to hide the stuff. I mean, if they brought the building down, they were going to still find whatever they would have removed. So, like, you're not hiding the fact that you removed a bunch of stuff from
Like
the building.
golden heroin. Sorry.
Yeah, okay, let's say you removed a whole bunch of gold and heroin from World Trade Center 7, and then you nuked the building. Nuking the building doesn't necessarily hide the fact that the stuff's gone, because if the building's down, you're going to find the stuff if it were there.
Well, then you would have a bunch of essential workers there that would be there to clean up and everything. You'd have to get it out beforehand. So
Yeah, I think I would rather know why the building
why
had
they
to come
needed
down. Because I think the theory that a bunch of stuff was removed from the building is, I think that's been borne out, pretty well proven that there was
Brinks trucks.
Brinks
and
trucks
stuff
everywhere,
moving.
yes. Gold, silver, drugs, whatever.
Yeah.
Potential ATF involvement and just all kinds of sinister, fringy kind of stuff.
Yeah. How many TLAs can we get in this episode?
Oh, I forgot to do the TLA of the
The TLA of the
TLA
week.
of the week. I forgot to do it.
All right. Well, you survived. Pick your poison.
All right, did I win?
I think you did. I think you did exceptional.
All right. Well, I don't have a pick your poison to give you back because she sniped me with that pick your poison. It was totally unexpected throwback from the past, a blast from the past. But what we do have is, I'm on pick your poison. I need to go back over to the main scene. If anybody would like to produce our show, we would love for you to do so. Our subject for tonight's podcast is World Trade Center 7 and some other oddities that happened with the hijackers on September 11th. And, before we get into this, I think Jazmine and I both want everybody to know that we do not intend to convey any disrespect for those who lost their lives or for those who were close to them, or for the thousands of men and women who were sent overseas to get their legs blown off and stuff like that as a result of these attacks. we just believe differently than the mainstream narrative, and
Right.
we want to explore those beliefs with people who are open-minded, and it's not a disrespectful thing. I mean, this whole shutting down the discussion by saying that you are disrespectful to those that died, that's just
No,
horseshit.
it's
Yeah.
people undeniably it was a tragedy and people died, but
It was also an invisible tragedy that isn't well enough understood by most people.
right.
It wasn't just buildings coming down and people getting crushed and people jumping out of windows and burning to death. There was something so evil and sinister and global in nature that people just, I don't want to hear it, man. That's not real. Like, we're never going to overcome this kind of stuff until we can identify it, air it out, call it what it is. You know?
Have an open discussion and talk about it.
All right. PF3's lighting that birthday cake. Happy birthday, Mom. Jazmine, World Trade Center 7 was the third tower to come down on 9/11, right?
Yeah.
Building 1, Building 2, everybody knows about those, the North and South Towers. The Twin Towers, they called them.
Right.
But, kind of almost forgotten in the ashes of history is the fact that a third skyscraper in the World Trade Center complex came down
Right.
at 5:20 p.m. that same day. Very few people remember it. And in fact, the 9/11 Commission report, the official report commissioned by the United States government, doesn't mention Building 7 at all. And I have the 9/11 Commission report pulled up, and to just do a quick demonstration for the sake of absurdity, if you do a search for Building 7,
Yeah.
there are no hits. This is like an 8,000-page document or something. Building 7 isn't mentioned one time. The Solomon Brothers building isn't mentioned one time. There's so many different ways you can search it. Nope, it's not in the report. So they talk about 1 and 2. They talk about the Pentagon briefly, and that's it. And the other thing that I noticed about the 9/11 Commission report is that if you just look at the table of contents, well, let me just take it a step back. You've been in a scientific vocation
Yeah.
for a long time. And there's a certain way you write about scientific things. There's a certain style that's invoked when you are writing from a detached, objective point of view, right? So if you were in charge of labeling each section of the 9/11 Commission report, do you think that you would start by calling the very first section, quote, "We have some planes"?
No.
No, it's like a 6-year-old did this, and this is the official 9/11 Commission report. And so sadly, we have some planes.
We have some planes.
It's almost like it's a dramatically written thing about a dramatically choreographed event.
Right.
And this document is, for the most part, horseshit and intended to reinforce the official narrative. It's not reliable. Anyway, so that's the 9/11 Commission report.
But if they make it so long,
Oops.
what was it that?
Look, you're behind the chat. Look at that.
Oh.
Let's scooch over.
So, what was it that Martin Geddes would say?
Oof. Boy, now we're definitely banned.
That to make something believable, a lie believable, you have to make it so big.
Yeah, it's got to be so over the top.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that was like one of the things like that he was like, you just have to make it completely like over the top, and then people will believe it.
People gravitate towards it. Yeah. So what
Right.
was the lie? I mean, he used to use the phrase "the big lie" all the time.
Right.
But what is the lie as it pertains to 9/11? That
Well, I think
19 devoutly religious men got together and decided to hijack 4 airplanes and somehow successfully crashed 3 out of 4 of them into their intended targets. I mean, it doesn't even sound right when you say it.
No. And I mean, you look at what's going on even right now, and it's like, what, we've got 4 planes. Wait, hey, we have some planes.
We have some planes.
Yes. There we go. We can reuse this commission report right now. We'll just change the title on the front page, and then move it over to Afghanistan.
Yeah, we have some
then
planes.
we have some planes.
Dude, are you kidding me? Yeah, that's like dark irony, isn't it?
Here we are, 20 years later.
Yeah. We also have 4 variants on top of it too. But at any rate, not going there, not changing the subject.
Moo.
Okay, so interestingly though, when it came to Building 7, which I'm going to pull up on the screen here for us to look at. Where is it? Nope. There's Building 7. Yep. Also, that's Building 7 too. So there's what Building 7 looked like when it was standing.
Yep.
And the World Trade Center Plaza in front of it. It was built in 1984, which I believe it was completed 4 years after the Twin Towers, which I think were completed in 1980. And that's what it looked like standing. And that's what it looked like the morning after. There's already cranes and everything in there. But they hadn't removed a whole lot of rubble by the time of the next morning. So from 5:20 p.m.
That is a pretty nice little pancake collapse.
Yeah, pancakes. Pancakes are wamples. I think this is a wample.
You think it's a wample? You don't think it's a pancake
Well,
collapse?
I don't. I think it was, obviously it was demolished, intentionally demolished.
Oh, yeah.
So, but here's the interesting thing. The battalion fire chief for that area at the time on the day of 9/11 was a guy by the name of John Norman. And he basically said that they had to evacuate 600 feet around. They had to move everybody. Before the building collapsed, they had to get everybody outside of a 600-foot radius. And his rationale for that, in retrospect, as describing when he was describing the activity of evacuating people before the building came down, he said that the rationale is that you have to get people as far away from a building that's about to be imploded as the building is tall. And the building was about 600 feet tall. In other words, if a building's going to come down, whatever comes
down... Did he actually use the word that imploded?
Well, he didn't. But you know who did? Rudy Giuliani. Now, let's not get ahead here too far. So John Norman says, quote, after we found Chief Ganchi, in addition to recon, I was detailed to make sure the collapse zone for World Trade Center 7 had been set up and was being maintained. The sector commanders were trying to clear out of that area. We expected it to fall to the south into the areas we were searching. Now, we're still worried about 7. We have guys trying to make their way up into the pile. They're telling us that 7 is going to fall down. And that was one of the directions from the command post, to make sure that we clear the collapse zone from 7. And this is a 600-foot tall building, so we had to clear a 600-foot radius from that building. And this was stuff that he knew before the building came down. So clearly the authorities, at least the fire command, knew that this building was going to come down. Which, why would they expect World Trade Center 7 to... Why would they have any reason to think it was going to fall, being that it has never happened before or since? A steel frame building, anyway. So, and then you got this interesting thing about Rudy Giuliani accidentally slipping up and saying the word implode. I'm going to play a quick video for you. Make sure this is still on the screen for everybody. Okay, there's Rudy.
That you were aware that towers were going to collapse in advance. We'd like to know who told you the towers were going to collapse in advance, sir? And also we'd like to know who else you told.
Well, the fact is that I didn't realize the towers would collapse. I never realized that. If I can complete the sentence, if you give me the courtesy to complete the sentence, our understanding was that over a long period of time, the way other buildings collapse, the towers could collapse, meaning over a 7, 8, 9, 10-hour period. No one that I knew of had any idea that they would implode. That was a complete surprise. Thank you.
Thank you all.
So in his denial of foreknowledge, he actually introduces the word implode.
Right.
Which it's just...
Well,
it tells you he knows what happened.
Right. And here's where I want to kind of bring back episode 37 when we did United 93. In that episode, we had shared like some twists of fate and people that were supposed to have been in the towers and such. Jim Pierce, for those of you who perhaps didn't see that episode, is a cousin to George W. Bush.
All right, so Jim Pierce is then President Bush's cousin.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Manager and director of AON Corporation, and he was supposed to be on the 105th floor of the South Tower. Ironically, on that day, the conference room was too small, and he moved his
for his meeting.
Yeah, for his meeting. So he moved his people over to the Millennium Hotel.
Was the conference room really too small?
And what I'm thinking is, like, you're in the Twin Towers, and you can tell me you can't find a large conference room, that you have to move your meeting of people over to a hotel, and you just happen to be the cousin to Bush. And then you have something like Giuliani.
Well, Bush also had a... George W. Bush's, I believe, one of his brothers was also a CEO or an executive with, I believe, Kroll, or one of those companies that was in charge of security for the World Trade Center complex. I mean, that's one hell of a coincidence.
Right.
But I don't have anything prepared on that. So.
Right. And, I do know a little bit further on. So you were going to talk about some stuff with BBC and some footage there. But just in relation to that previous episode 37, another person that was supposed to have been in the towers was the Duchess of York, Sarah Ferguson, who got held up at the NBC studio when she was doing her interview with Matt Lauer. And she was late getting back to her meeting with the children, or Chances for Children charity. So she was not in the building also. So it's like, it's interesting how you have these high profile people making statements
and taking actions which are, convenient for them.
There's
a long list of celebrity...
and this is just speculation and conjecture.
Yeah. There's a long list of amazing coincidences when it comes to people who probably should have died, but didn't.
Right. Well, I mean, MJ was actually supposed to be there that day.
Well, Michael Jackson got a bad feeling about it.
Right.
And turned around, and before any of this stuff went down.
Yeah. Like, I really do believe that there were truly people with, like, honest to God twists of fate. And
there was a keystone event, a spiritual keystone event on 9/11 that I don't think anybody can really fully grasp, but there were tremendous energies that were like converging in one point. There's also a really interesting story, and I've listened to a couple different podcasts about people who were with MJ or encountered MJ on his way back home to California, because they grounded all of the flights, and Michael Jackson being one of these like super esoteric, just eccentric, like weird people, weird celebrity, like super OCD, and like has to have his tea a certain way, and has to have everything in a plastic cup, can't have crushed ice and whatever, all those kind of weird things. Can you imagine traveling with that guy, trying to get back like 4,000 miles in the other direction during the biggest shitstorm of the new century. I mean, anyway, I'm a big MJ fan, so
yeah, no. I often wonder. I remember when I was a little girl, going to Clinton's inauguration, and at that time they had the stage and everything for his speech and everything he made at the Lincoln Memorial.
It's 1992, yeah.
And being there and watching, a bunch of performers on both, like people just lining the reflection pond and everything. But how he suddenly became ill and did not.
Who, MJ?
Yeah. And he was the only one that didn't go up. And something about that always kind of sat a little funny with me too.
Yeah.
Like I was obviously bummed out.
And that was long before MJ started having like his health problems that eventually apparently
right
led to his death.
Right, but it was just like he was supposed to go up, and then all of a sudden, they made an announcement. It's like, no, he's not going on. And it's just you see some of this stuff and like this pattern, and it just kind of makes you wonder.
Well, there were powers around that guy, Michael Jackson. There were powers around him, and I think he was exuding them and being chased by them all at the same time. He was at the center of something, Because to be, and again, I'm not going to go off on a total Michael Jackson rant, but I kind of am, so just bear with me for a second. If you're Michael Jackson, like you come from the most successful, Motown R&B family pretty much ever, but certainly up until that point, and you're the youngest little brother in a kingdom of amazing performers. And that entire family, all the siblings are just like superior musicians and producers. Right. And even the ones that weren't musical, like LaToya, still had great success in other ventures, other creative ventures. And so the guy was a king among kings when it came to his craft.
Yeah.
So at any rate, check out his... for whoever's not seen it, look at his Super Bowl halftime that he did. And I believe it was in San Diego. Utterly unbelievable stuff. Awesome stuff. Michael Jackson. All right, now, where should we leave? We're talking about 9/11 here.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the video of two reporters, actually. And you have to catch it because it's towards the beginning of the video, but did you know that both CNN and the BBC reported that World Trade Center 7 had fallen 14 or 15 minutes before it actually came down? Let's check it out real quick.
Yeah.
Now, more on the latest building collapse in New York. You might have heard a few moments ago I was talking about the Salomon Brothers building collapsing. And indeed it has. Apparently that's only a few hundred yards away from where the World Trade Center towers were. And it seems that this was not a result of a new attack. It was because the building had been weakened during this morning's attacks. We'll probably find out more now about that from our correspondent, Jane Stanley. Jane, what more can you tell us about the Salomon Brothers building and its collapse?
Well, only really what you already know. Details are very, very sketchy. There's almost a sense downtown in New York behind me, down by the World Trade Centers, of just an area completely closed off as the rescue workers try to do their job. But this isn't the first building that has suffered as a result. We know that part of the Marriott Hotel...
So they have basically pronounced that World Trade Center 7 has come down.
Right.
But you can see it in the video behind her.
Right.
Still.
Yeah.
And this is live. It's all being presented live.
Right.
But even further, they already had their talking points in order about what caused the collapse.
Exactly.
How did they know what caused the collapse at that point?
Right. And then that's where I said why I kind of wanted to bring back the whole episode 37 on the twist of fate. It's like, okay, the BBC had a narrative before, like saying that the building had collapsed, and it's clearly there right behind her.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Not collapsed. He's saying it did. And then you have...
Well, she concurred with him. So the anchor said the building had collapsed, and then she concurred.
Right.
She didn't restate of her own volition, but she concurred with him about the fact.
Well, she's like, it's right, right behind me here.
Well, she was talking about the World Trade Center site. But my guess is that, they're reading off of a script. This is news that's been written for them to read.
Right. So if they had that script, then you don't think that it's possible that NBC Studio in their interview of the Duchess of York, Sarah Ferguson, didn't have that script also? It could be a possibility, right?
Well, I think that's a strong possibility, and that may have been why she was spared from the disaster. So here's what we have so far on Building 7. When we let off about 25 minutes ago, we said that we knew the New York authorities knew that WTC 7 was coming down. Mm-hmm. Okay? That's been documented. There's also been recorded radio chatter. There's 17 different firefighters that were on the radio that were recorded saying that they knew the building was going to come down up to 2 hours before it happened. Okay? So we know that the New York authorities had that knowledge. Okay, we know that Rudy Giuliani had that knowledge.
Correct.
And we also know that Rudy Giuliani was aware that the building was brought down by implosion and not by whatever the official story says, office fires or something. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, how did they even speculate that they could put a story together how did that office fire begin?
So then we know that in addition to those two, we know that CNN and BBC both had foreknowledge of the collapse because they effed up and reported it early, which is just the best kind of. It would be funny if it weren't true. You know what I mean? It's so ironic because whenever the media makes a fool of itself, it's entertaining. It just can't be in this case.
But the same thing when we did. Episode 57, which you can get on the audio version, CNN also had McIntyre right there at the Pentagon, and that's where he was saying, "I don't see any sign of a plane. There's no wing. There's no tail." And I just see small pieces of rubble.
Yeah, so the reporters that were on site were reporting something different than what was coming down from the studio. All right, so the anchors were saying one thing, and then when they're sending their beat reporters out, they're saying something completely different. All right, the guys that were down at Ground Zero were reporting things that were different than what the anchors were reporting. And you said that, too, about the reporter that was at the Pentagon. He's looking around. He's saying, I don't see any evidence of a plane. I've covered multiple air disasters before, and this is not one of them. And that was, of course, removed from the internet and yanked, censored.
Yes.
Okay. So we have institutional foreknowledge, we have media foreknowledge, we have the 9/11 Commission report making no mention of Building 7 whatsoever. And, of course, everybody's seen the video. If you're watching this, you probably have seen the video of the building coming down. It sags from the top in the middle and then just comes straight down.
Yeah, demo drop.
Yep, demo drop. So... there's so much mystery around it. What was in Building 7? You had
That was why I did that pick your poison,
Well, you had the mayor's office of emergency preparedness. So he had like a disaster bunker. Giuliani had a disaster bunker in Building 7. You had offices of the CIA. You had offices of the Fed. And you had offices of Salomon Brothers. So there was a big convergence of intelligence and financial interests in that building. And so what we have been told that there was contents of that building that were removed. And we've been told, not because we watched it on YouTube.
No.
but we've been told.
Yeah. I have a reliable source that told me some contents that were present and were taken away.
Drugs, metal money, gold and silver. Anything else?
Not offhand that I can.
So, but there's pretty good documentation regarding an endless train of Brinks trucks leaving the World Trade Center in the days preceding the destruction. So that, I guess, kind of ties out.
Yeah.
So, are you familiar with the crime of identity theft?
Of course.
All right. Well, what's your understanding of identity theft? Like, what does it mean to you when you hear that phrase?
Well, somebody gains access to your personal information and uses it for whatever purpose, be it to create fraud, theft of your personal belongings, your bank account, essentially taking over who you are as a person. They can impersonate you.
And why, like, what motivates your typical identity theft? Like, what do you think, what are people trying to get when they do it?
Generally money.
Okay. Or purchasing power.
Right, yeah. They're going to skim your card, typically, go on a little shopping spree.
So they either want money to spend or they want stuff.
Right.
Okay. So to enrich themselves.
Right.
All right. Why in the world, if you were going to crash an airplane and die in the process, and you knew you were going to, would you bother to steal somebody's identity first?
That is a very good question, Nigel Kent.
Especially when you didn't have a rap sheet. Okay. And, okay, let me take this step, just a step back real quick, because we're going to talk about a guy by the name of Abdulaziz Al-Omari. And that's the guy who you are looking at if you're paying attention on YouTube right now. That's the guy who's on our screen, right next to my mug. And Abdulaziz here is one of the, I'm going to say alleged hijackers of American Flight 11. And the reason I say alleged is because this guy's identity hasn't been properly demonstrated as being the same as the guy who was on the plane, assuming the plane was hijacked. And that's a big assuming, and I know we're getting into some very deep shit. So I don't want to go there. I don't want to say a plane wasn't hijacked, but the fact that this guy's identity can't be tied back to anybody that was actually on the plane is a huge problem for the official narrative. And let's just say the plane was hijacked, but there's a darn good chance it wasn't this guy, and I'm going to tell you why right now. Wikipedia claims that Abdulaziz Al-Omari had his identity confused with a man named Abdulaziz Al-Omari, who is perfectly alive and well in Saudi Arabia. In other words, when they published the names of the hijackers, like literally like weeks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks after this thing, there were a number of people whose photographs were used that were people that were actually still alive and with the same names. And one of them is
That's a lot of doppelgangers.
Right? Okay, so this guy's like, it wasn't me.
Right.
I'm alive, man.
Right.
It's the most absurd defense that you'd ever have to use in a suicide hijack. No, it wasn't me. See, I'm alive. I know it looks just like me, but it wasn't. I know it's the same name, but I swear I didn't hijack that plane and crash it. So this alive and well Abdulaziz Al-Omari even caught grief from local law enforcement in Saudi Arabia and offered to travel to the U.S. to prove his innocence in the weeks following 9/11. Why doesn't Wikipedia point out how stupid it is that this alive and well Abdulaziz couldn't have been a suicide hijacker due to the fact that he's alive? That's mentioned nowhere on Wikipedia. So this kind of got me thinking, like, how hard would it be for Abdulaziz Al-Omari to be mistaken for a 9/11 hijacker just on the basis of his name. Like, in other words, Jasmine Star isn't a super common name. Nigel Kent, maybe in the UK, but certainly not in the United States. John Smith?
Right.
I've known 2 guys named John Smith. Right? How many people do you know that have the exact same name that aren't in your family? You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
I mean, you have common names and uncommon names.
Right.
And,
So what I wanted to find out was whether or not Abdulaziz Al-Omari was a common Saudi Arabian name. Because if it is,
right,
then there's some credence to this, this...
Correct. I see where you're going, yeah.
So, in other words, if it's a common name, it could be possible for a real-life guy to be mistaken for one of these hijackers.
Right, where they just pulled the wrong picture. Or,
Yep.
Okay.
Or just for whatever reason happen to have a picture of the same dude. But I'm just talking about names right now. All right. So I did some research on Saudi Arabian names. The most common, and again, this is from now, not from 2001. The most common family names in Saudi Arabia are Khan, Ali, and Hassan. So Kent, Star, Khan, Ali, and Hassan. But Al-Omari isn't even in the top 200 most common family names in Saudi Arabia. Meanwhile, Abdulaziz isn't among the 500 most common given names in Saudi Arabia. So right there, the guy's name is among the rarest of all names in the country. This would make a case of mistaken identity very unlikely. It turns out that the alive and well Abdulaziz lost his passport a few years before 9/11, or more to the point, he had his passport stolen. So, I mean, what are the odds of that? This means that the guy that they say was on Flight 11 as a hijacker wasn't.
And how many years prior?
Less than 2 years prior.
Had his
passport stolen, yes.
Okay, so then that also goes to make you look at it a little bit further and say that this was potentially in the works for
a long time.
For at least 2 years.
I think it was in the works for...
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Jinx. So, Abdulaziz Al-Omari, I think it's safe to say, just based on what's out there on Wikipedia, like I've tried to wrap my head around this and come to a different conclusion. I've looked at it many times over the last few weeks, knowing what we're going to do on this episode. Now, what really blew my mind is when I got to the end of my, thinking and studying about this guy, and then I went to the next guy in the list, the next hijacker in the list. Same thing. Same thing. He had his identity stolen too. So now you've got 2 guys on the same flight that you can't actually place on that flight because there's guys over there in the Middle East saying, no, I'm alive and it wasn't me.
Right.
It's beyond bizarre. Now, there's probably somebody out there that has supposedly debunked this, but I wasn't able to find it. So that's, World Trade Center 7 and mistaken identities, which are 2 correlating factors. When we dump our 9/11 massive podcast here in a few weeks, this will be part of it.
For anyone that joined late, if we are moving, look for some updates on our social media platforms.
Yeah. And when you say if we are moving, you're talking about if we decide that we're going to abandon the tube and move to...
If we get strike 3.
Yeah.
Then we'll be moving to another platform for video views.
Which we're not going to name right now because there's too much crap with the tube. I don't want to get in any more trouble with them because they've got a lot of our content right now under their hood. So
right.
So Big Tech Watchdog. That's why I'm starting the podcast about censorship. It's an audio-only podcast about how people are getting screwed by the social media technocracy and the big tech mafia. There's 2 episodes out so far. If you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever, Big Tech Watchdog.
Even on Alexa.
Yes, you can get it on Alexa too, apparently, I'm told. It's important we keep talking and keep having our voices heard and keep entertaining open discourse, even with people with whom we disagree.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this big dividing line. And on one side of it, you've got people who want everybody to be able to speak. And then on the other side of it, you've got this group of people who only want themselves to be able to speak. And so when you have somebody that wants to take away the resource of speech from somebody who wants everybody to have it, who do you think is going to win? It's a big deal. It's a big deal. Okay, Jazmine Star, how does everybody get a hold of us?
To reach us right here on our YouTube channel for now, Trouble in Paradise. Smash and like that subscribe button and join in on the live chat anytime we're on. We love it when you join in. And welcome back, Precious. We missed you.
My precious.
Yes. On Instagram, you can find us at Trouble239, Twitter at Tipcast239, email trouble@trouble239.com. Our Patreon is Trouble239, audio available on all major podcatchers. Personal connections to reach us. My Twitter is JazmineStar239. That's JazmineStarr239. On Instagram, you can look me up under Starlight Ratings as Jazmine Star.
And I'm Nigel Kent, NigelKent239 on Twitter. Follow the show on Instagram at Trouble239.
Yep.
And I guess until next time, we need you to stay out of trouble.
Yeah. I'm just going to end with this. The content presented by Trouble in Paradise contains speculation and conjecture and is not intended as educational material or advice. It is therefore not misinformation and does adhere to YouTube's community guidelines.
Speculation and conjecture.
Yes.
All right. How do you turn this thing off?